Hello, I would like to show you today another attacking game against Boris Gelfand this time in European Cup Team Championship 1996, played in Berlin. I used to play, as I mentioned in my previous lesson, in Bundesliga for the German Berlin Chess Club, and we were quite good. So Alexei Shirov was on the second board, for example, and yeah, we've played European Championships also, and that was yeah, quite a memorable game for because, well, first of all, to beat Gelfand with black especially is yeah, it's not easy at all, and especially because of the final position on the board. I mean, the final combination of this game, it's quite rare the case that you manage to execute such a simple but quite a beautiful combination. So um, again, it's going to be my game with black when I was mating my opponent. Uh, Actually, usually it's other way around. In fact, with white you're playing aggressive, and you have much more mating attacks with white, and with black, especially on the top level, normally you have much fewer games where you have some violent attacks. But for me, yeah, I had such a repertoire that I was playing closed openings, knight f3, move one, most of the time that period. And but with black, I used to play Sicilian and Meran Slav, very sharp opening. So that's maybe the reason why from time to time I was getting mated, but also I had a chance to mate my opponents with black more often than with white. Then you will see that this tendency have changed, and I have then my repertoire started to become more sharper with white and more solid, I would say, classical with black. So I will have more white games further on in this course, but doesn't matter for the educational purposes. It doesn't matter if it's white or black. So Boris started with d4. So as I mentioned already, I'm playing Meran, e3, knight bd7, queen c2, bishop d6, and g4. Well, this very aggressive move actually is now it's becoming less and less popular because again, with engines, black found a number of ways to be fine here. But at that time, it was quite a fresh idea. First, it was played in 1992, I think, by Shabalov or Shirov. But in any case, it was the idea of Shabalov, Latvian, but now for quite a long time already American grandmaster. Very aggressive style, actually very interesting player. But the funny thing is that actually I've analyzed it, I think, in the 1990 or something. Actually much before it was played, because I started to prepare Meran at that time, around the age of 15. I used to play some, yeah, I was not that good in openings in my childhood, and used to play some Dutch, Leningrad system. Yeah, I was suffering a lot. I mean, winning some games, of course, as well. But once I would play against strong opponents, then things were getting much more difficult. And one day I decided, okay, enough is enough. I should start to probably play something more classical, which also probably suits my style better. And I've started to study Meran, and I got this idea: why not to play g4? Again, I would like to mention, of course, that there were no engines at that time. So, well, I mean, it looks frankly very strange, this move g4. I mean, I've analyzed it, and I remember for a couple of days on my own, and I remember I couldn't actually find any refutation. Actually, it looked very interesting to me, but simply at that age, you know, chess was a little different understanding of the game, and such moves like g4 and move 7, it was well, supposed to be against all rules and supposed to be bad. And I, even though I couldn't really find what is wrong with this move, but I decided, okay, probably there is something wrong with me, that I cannot refute such a ridiculous move. And I just left it as it is. Anyway, I was well, supposed to play with black Meran, so I thought, okay, nobody's going to play g4. And then suddenly I saw 1992, Shirov started to play it, and a lot of games, and actually it's still a very valid, and even Kasparov was playing it, this move, so it's still a very serious option. But anyway, so I remember once analyzing this, the time I thought that, well, of course, nowadays there is actually quite a good move h6, supposed to be fine, but very sharp. Like I think the main line goes like rook g1, e5, and with a lot of very sharp variation, but seemingly Blake is doing well there. Also, of course, you can take on g4, rook g1, and now knight takes h2 is one of the moves, and with a sharp game. Another move, I think, is queen f6, which is now pretty popular also. All in all, you can study it. I think nowadays white is having troubles to find anything there. But at that time, it was very fresh. And I remember I decided, okay, I have, just in case, some very strange move, bishop b4. This is a move which I've played. It was like an emergency weapon that in case if I play against very well prepared opponent, so I can surprise him with bishop g4. It could have even been a novelty at that time. So very strange, I'm losing a tempi like this. But once I thought once white have played g4, okay, I can, so he cannot castle short anymore, so I can afford maybe losing a tempi. And the idea is that I'm, in a way, I'm parrying the threat of g5, because now, due to this pin, I have knight e4 move. Oh, but still, nowadays theory says that it doesn't fully equalize bishop b4. But I remember Boris have started to think, at least after bishop b4, so we started to play a game. Not that I had deep analysis there, but I managed to get what I wanted, to get a game that we play, because Boris Gelfand was always a very strong theoretician. And I was not yet, at least at that time, and I wanted to avoid some sharp theoretical lines with this move. So he played bishop d2. It's supposed to be actually still the main move. Queen e7, and now a3. I think that was I wouldn't say mistake, but after a3, I think Blake is doing, in general, Blake is doing fine. So the test for the main test is g5, and this is supposed to be the main move now. So the idea now, of course, there is no knight e4. I'm losing a pawn simply, so that's why I wanted to take on c3 and play knight e4. That is the idea. h4 and b6, trying to develop bishop b7. But still, there were quite some games after 1996, and still it seems that white are playing long castle and keeps some initiative there. So Blake is not fully equalizing. But okay, that was later. I mean, for next games against g4, I played something else already. But this time it worked. It was a surprise weapon, and it worked because Boris played a3, a very logical move as well. Takes, because white wants to play bishop b4, which is quite an unpleasant idea. I mean, but now b6, that is the plan. And the idea is that now bishop b4, of course, is met with c5. And black starts to develop his bishop quickly. a3 is a kind of tempi loss, and still it's a useful move, but not necessary move. And I think black is doing fine here already. After b6, bishop d3 was played in the game. Probably c takes d5 was a better try. And now let's say e d5, bishop d3. Strange position, complicated. My plan was actually to play maybe a5. First of all, to stop bishop b4, and also the idea is that in case of long castle, for instance, and white cannot really make short castle already because g4 is played. Then bishop a6, trying to change this bishop, and the knight goes to e4. And well, the position is double-edged, but it also can be quite dangerous for white, because his king is not safe there, as you will see also in this game later on. But maybe knight e5 is a critical move. It's a strange position, takes, knight d7. Now engine even proposes to take on h7. Very complicated, I would say, double-edged game. So, but that was a better choice, because after bishop d3, now black has bishop a6 move. And here black definitely solves all his problems after bishop a6, because you see white cannot really play b3. I mean, he can, but then where to castle with the king later on? That's a big question. Yeah, because well, short castle with g4 looks strange. Long castle a3 pawn will be hanging, and anyway black will prepare c5 sooner or later. So the tactical justification of it, that in case of g5, black has dc4. Maybe that is what Boris missed or underestimated, because after gf cd3 is working, of course fe dc, black will end up pawn up simply in the endgame. So queen a4, and now queen takes f6. So the problem is that in case of queen takes a6, queen f3, the knight is hanging. So that's why g4 doesn't really work, because of dc5. And yeah, then white played queen a4, but after dc4, actually white is already has to think about how to equalize, and I'm not sure white has full equality already here. Because in case of queen takes c6, attacking the rook, black can do, for instance, rook c8, queen a4, bishop b7, bishop e2, knight d5, and this diagonal is open, very powerful diagonal for the bishop on b7. Probably black will prepare a6, b5, and it seems to me that he's just better here. That's why after dc4, in case of bishop takes c4, black can just take on c4, I suppose, but even I would seriously consider a move like bishop b7 here, trying to play c5. So now it's quite obvious here that white would have been very happy to have the pawn back on g2. Yeah, but it's pawns, they don't move backwards as far as I remember in chess. So queen takes a6, c takes d3, queen takes d3, castle. Well, now, of course, again, if the pawn would have been on g2, white would have just castle and with an equal position, but instead he has to proceed with having an unsecured king, whatever white is doing, whether he's playing long castle or leaves the king in the center or trying to play short castle, there is no safe place for the white king already. And even if white black doesn't really have a big advantage yet, but it's clearly, I mean, at least in a practical sense, it's much more comfortable position for black, no doubt about it. Boris played g5 here, so he decided to try to play for the long castle, which is logical. Maybe e4 was an interesting option. Here, the idea is that in case of c5, for instance, this is one of my main plans here, maybe g5, knight h5, long castle, and white has some play in the center. Maybe f5 here is an interesting move. The game is sharp, but I still prefer black, but it's still quite double-edged. So after e4, another option is just to take the pawn. I can do it now, rook g1, f5. But after e5, white has some compensation for the pawn. I mean, definitely not really for an advantage. I mean, more for equality, this compensation. I mean, black is solid and so on, but at least white, that is what I would personally prefer with white, because at least now there are certain potential threats like bishop d2, h3, there is a certain play on the g line. At least white gets some counterplay here. So maybe e4 was a better option than g5, because after g5, knight d5, bishop d2, I think I played a good move, even if engines, they prefer e5 here, which was definitely one of the options which I considered. But here, after many exchanges, takes, long castle, it's, yeah, you cannot now, at least it's very dangerous to take on g5. There is some e4 coming, rook g1, etc. So rook a d8, probably f4, white has a move, and queen e6. Okay, black is definitely doing fine, even maybe more than fine, but there are a lot of simplifications, and it seems to me that with accurate play, white should manage to hold a draw here. So I decided to play more actively f5, using the fact that in case of gf6, queen f6, white has troubles with the f line. Yeah, and otherwise I'm stopping e4 here. Bishop on d2 is not good, and I think that black has, at least in practical sense, after f5 has a very nice initiative. Here, h4, for some reason, computer says that h4 was better than long castle, and after c5, h5. Kind of strange. I don't really see where white is going. I mean, he's not going to mate, and it seems that black has some tempest like rook c8, but for some reason, still computer slightly prefers h4 than long castle, because after long castle, c5, of course, that's my plan, king b1. And now I will offer you to take your time to think about this position, how to continue with black, because, well, obviously black has a good game. I think there is no doubt about it, but still white is still solid. He wants to play rook c1, and it's not so easy to prove any advantage here still with black. So try to think, what would you do? How would you continue with black? I mean, what are the possible ideas? And I think what I played was actually a good way of playing, a good move, and in fact, it's the first line also of the engine. So take your time and come up with some ideas. Black's main asset actually is a very powerful knight on d5, which I've managed to secure by playing f5. So white cannot really kick this knight away from this great beautiful square, because on e4 I always take on e4 and then playing queen f7, attacking the knight, f2 pawn starts to fall. So that is a very good piece I have. But I have a certain issue with a knight on with a knight on d7, sorry, because it doesn't really have many squares. I mean, the pawn on g5 is limiting this knight. Of course, I can try, for instance, to activate it by taking on d4. And now, in case if white takes with a piece, whether it's knight or a queen, then black will play knight c5, followed by knight e4, very good square for the knight. But the problem is e takes d4. And it's very much in a classical style to organize a weakness, isolated pawn in your opponent's camp, and the knight on d5 is perfectly blockading it. So everything Nemtsovich would have been very happy about it. And true, that's what usually is quite good, for you to have such a structure, and especially with the black square bishop. But here, in this particular case, I start to have some problems with the e6 pawn. For example, rook c8, logical move, rook h1, and I don't see what I've achieved, because my knight on d7 is still limited. But now, because the e line is opened, and now the e6 pawn potentially becomes vulnerable. So I think here white can keep equality due to this counterplay on the e6 pawn. So this is not what I wanted. Another idea is trying to push c4, b5, a5. Of course, that would be the best you can manage here with black. But in case of rook ac8, white is playing rook c1, and still not so easy to understand how do I manage to play c4 in this position. So finally, after those considerations, it's quite logical. I came up with move b5 here, which is a very good move. Now definitely threatening to play c4. And then you just start to push pawns, and the white skin will be mated pretty soon. Then again, in case of dc5, of course, the knight comes c5, e4, and this looks pretty bad for white. So white has no other really option than to take this pawn on b5. Not something you enjoy doing, opening up the b line, but there was no real choice anymore. So rook a b8. Now, of course, white starts a direct attack using, first of all, that the b line is open, then also that black wins some tempest, because queen has to retreat, queen a5. And here, maybe I actually played, it's a mistake, I would say. What I've done, the most logical move, rook b3, just trying to double the rook. And also sometimes a c4 square can be used by the knight. So I mean, of course, I saw that c4 is possible just to play it slow, so to say. But actually, it is very strong. I mean, rook c1, rook c8, king a1, and let's say queen d6, and black just slowly continues his attack. Maybe queen c6, rook b5. Engine is given quite considerable advantage for black here, which is logical. But again, in a practical sense, I wouldn't say that rook b3 is a mistake, because actually white has a very difficult position now, because he has to make a lot of only moves actually to keep it alive. Yeah, and again, the play is very difficult. I can tell you that here computer says that this position is almost equal, a little better for black, equal, but you shouldn't be confused with this assessment, because I tell you again, the position, such position in practical sense is very, very difficult. I would say is almost lost, even if it's objectively, if computer can find all the best moves to finally to hold it. Practically for human, it's very, very difficult. The king is weak. There are a lot of potential threats. You don't really know which one is decisive, which threat can be parried. So I mean, in any case, again, that here black is attacking. His play is easy, comfortable, pleasant after all, and white is practically in quite a difficult situation. So Boris has played king a2. It's clear that the king, white's king, has to retreat from this B line. But yeah, hard to understand why. I mean, it's really, I will show you now all the variations. It's really, well, matter of intuition. You cannot calculate it out. I can fully understand why Gelfand played king a2, but actually it's a decisive mistake in this position. So the only way to save the game, I mean, at least to keep it going, was king a1, actually. And after rook fb8, rook b1. Of course, I understand why king a2, because here, let's say after rook fb8, the rook will be hanging somewhere, so black doesn't have this knight b6, knight c4 potential maneuver, which can be very dangerous, yeah, because the rook is hanging. So, but there is one important drawback of king a2, which I will show you, which I managed to use in this game. But so after king a1, it looks, well, very dangerous. Also, another reason why king a1, because I suppose Boris was very worried about rook fb8, rook b1, and now c takes d4. C takes d4, knight takes d4, knight c5. You see why king a2, because now after king knight takes b3, knight takes b3 comes with check. And this looks really dangerous. For example, again, in case of rook hc1, for instance, rook b5 is possible, which is basically winning, because again, after knight takes b5, there is a fork, knight b3, and black wins. So that's actually understandable why, you cannot calculate it out, this position. It looks really bad for white here, but okay, engines managed to find some miraculous escape here, playing knight c6, only moves queen d6, knight b8, rook b8. Now knight b3 is a is a threat, is a real threat. So b4, opening up the king, queen e5 check, king a2, knight e4, and okay, it looks, normally you just stop here when you're calculating variations, and just looks like, okay, white is going to get mated with such a king. But strangely enough, after rook b2, according to engines, white holds here. Let's say knight takes f2, rook f1, knight e4, and I don't know how. Don't ask me why, but it seems that white can manage to hold this position, which is, well, doesn't look at all humanly that this is the case, but yeah, computer says so. So I'm pretty sure that was the reason why Gelfand played king a2 instead of king a1. But also black can continue with c4, also rook b1, rook c8, rook c1, queen d6, etc. Also white has only moves, looks pretty dangerous, pretty bad actually for white, but somehow queen a4, attacking the pawn on c4, knight b6, queen a5, and again, engines cannot find anything anything decisive for black. Let's say in case of queen c6, the absolutely only move is d5. So everything works just by tempi, by tactics, because if knight d5, of course, knight d4 comes. So, and let's say after queen d5 takes, rook c2, black should hold, white should hold here. But again, this is really unhuman, so you can, I mean, king a2 actually is more logical. It looks more logical just to have, just in case, the same idea, but to have the rook hanging somewhere on b3. But actually now it's already lost, in fact, strangely enough. Rook b8, rook b1, and the very important resource in all those lines I was showing you after king a1. Yeah, white has a better version having king on a2, but there is one very important drawback of king on a2 is that it gets on the attack of black's queen after e5. So this is a big difference. So now if king would have been on a1, then e5 is not working so well. But here black has queen e6, a very dangerous plan. I mean, queen e6 threat is very important. Still, it doesn't look like it's completely over, but actually there is no defense already after e5. So in case of d5, knight e5, queen e5, the b2 pawn is actually, is I'm threatening mate on rook takes b2. Again, with a king on a1, maybe there would have been bishop c3 move, which could save white, but here bishop c3 is losing because of knight takes c3 check, bc3, and now queen e4, very important resource. Even though it's pretty clear there must be mate here, yeah, frankly, but queen e4 is forcing basically a forced win because rook is hanging on b1, and after rook takes b3, queen c2 check, king a1, queen b3, and black is mating. So what else to do? Rook h1 is the last try for white. Some quite witty idea, rook h1, because after e takes d4, at least white has knight takes d4 because the knight on d5 is hanging. But queen e6, so that is a very important tempo which is decisive in this position. King a1, e d4. So now you see that now the knight is protected on d5, and in case of, okay, white cannot take on d4 because the knight is hanging on f3. Queen takes a7 looks strange, I would say. It's not really about pawns anymore, but now black has quite a choice of good moves, but actually the strongest is, strangely enough, f4 is a very good move just because of the spin on the third rank. Black wants to take on e3, and actually white is simply lost after f4. But Gelfand's idea was rook takes c5. That was what he wanted, I suppose. And now I want to offer you to think. Now it's pretty much more about calculation, imagination in this position, but there is things are still not so clear. There is only one very clear way to win this game here, and try to find it, because attacking is not only about doing right things, getting your pieces closer to the king, pushing your pawns, but also about calculation sometimes and finding some resources, tactical resources. So rook takes c5. I have the knight is hanging on d5, knight takes c5. Well, of course, the idea is not knight takes d4, because then black simply plays queen b6 and he is a rook up. So queen takes c5, that is white's idea. And now in case of d, actually knight d4, here it seems that the game ends in a draw. After ed2, for instance, knight takes c6, rook takes b2, quite a nice combination actually. But not enough to win, because after rook d1, rook b1 check, rook takes b1, rook takes b1 check. Now king a2 is saving white, because in case of king takes b1, d1 queen, king b2, for instance, black can play queen e2 check and actually take finally this knight on e6. But after king a2, rook a1 check, king b2, because black is threatening queen f8 mate. Yeah, so black has nothing better than actually giving a perpetual rook b1 check, king a2, and it's according to engines, it's a draw. Yeah. So d3 is not really working so well for black. In rook b5 is possible, but then white takes a second pawn for the exchange. Queen takes d4. His king is quite safe here. And I don't know if maybe I would still prefer black here, but I don't know. The position is not so clear anymore. But there is a very beautiful combination. I was so aesthetically pleased when I found it. I think already when playing queen e6 or ed4, I saw it. And it's actually it's very beautiful, and it's the only way for black to win. I hope you found it while thinking before after rook takes c5. So knight c3, very logical move, of course. And now, because of the pin on b line, white cannot take this knight, but knight takes d4 seems to that now all black's pieces are hanging, but rook takes b2. A very nice, actually, combination. So the idea is that now what to do? Mate on a2 is threatening. White has a tricky move, queen f8 check. So, of course, if king f8, then white even wins, because he takes on a6 with check and just takes on b2. But the problem is, of course, rook takes f8, and it doesn't work. And after rook takes b2, now, of course, already in case of rook takes b2, white has king takes b2, by the way, probably maybe as well, but actually queen f8 check is just wins. Yeah, king f8, knight takes e6 check and takes on b2. But here you already, this for sure you see, queen a2 check. This is a very nice combination. And here I still, I will never forgive Boris that he had just resigned in this position, but he should have taken on a2. He should have let me give this beautiful mate in this game, because actually it is really quite rare that first of all white is queen and piece up. And also, in chess composition, there is a thematic. I think it's called like a right mate. Right means that there is not a single piece which is not taking part in a mating structure. So here, black has only two pieces left on the board, knight and rook, and both are delivering mate. Yeah, so that would be a better way to finish the game. I still believe than to resign after queen a2 check. But still, of course, that was a very nice game. I mean, first of all, it was really well played. I mean, sometimes this kind of combinations occur accidentally, because white missed something, blunder, or some accidental beautiful combination. But actually here it was, as you see, it was very logical. I mean, from some point on, after king a2, white already didn't have any defense, and that was the only way for black to win also, because also it's not the same when black has 2-3 other options and just prefer the most beautiful one, but here it was also the only way to win. So a nice game. Hope you also enjoyed it, and let's move on. I have a number of other games when I made it my top 10 opponents with black in the 90s.